Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight on this unusually cold day. I'm so glad it at least stopped raining. So we are in for a real treat today with the exhibition that is about to open. Sorry, this is so bright. Called Creatures When Species Meet. This is an idea, a curatorial concept that Stephen has been thinking about for 3 years. And he came to me at the beginning and said, I have this idea. This is something that I really want to pursue. It's so interesting to me that there are many artists in the world right now that consider other creatures, animals and insects, as a collaborator. And I've discovered so many works where the artists, of course, initiate, but they truly bring an animal or another creature into their creative process. So there's a true collaborative spirit that happens in all of the works that you are about to experience on the 4th and 5th floor. And of course, there are some historic precedents with William Wegman and Marina Abramovic that you'll also get to experience. So there's a longer tradition, especially since the 1970s, about the subject matter. But Stephen has done really a tremendous curatorial job in researching and thinking about artists, and truly artists who practice around the entire globe, to bring this exhibition to life. And as you can imagine, despite the fact that we are the Contemporary Art Center, we are here to open minds. This was an exhibition that challenged all of us because there are a few animals in the show, and at the beginning there were other works that we discussed that also incorporated also like live animals. And there's just a lot that you have to consider. And so we talked with many different groups in Cincinnati to make sure that the welfare of the animals is for and foremost top of our minds. So we've done that. We are grateful for all of the advice and all the counsel we got from so many agencies in Cincinnati. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. And as many of you also know, because you're intimately familiar with the Contemporary Art Center, this is his last big group show here at the CAC as our former curator. And he is back from Houston, Texas, and was here now for 10 days, and it was a real treat and really special to have him here. And he is also tonight featuring one of his most fabulous suits and shoes. So, with no further ado, please help me welcome Stephen Matijcio.
My suit, and I thank you, Ravel. No, thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here. It's wonderful. This has felt a lot like a family reunion coming back. And I have the great pleasure tonight of introducing two speakers that I greatly admire and that I have been so inspired by. But before I do that, I just want to give a few thanks and just sort of set the table. So first of all, a massive thanks to Rafaela and to everyone at the CAC. This show was never going to be safe. It was never going to be easy. It was going to be unwieldy and disorienting and worrisome, and for all those reasons, it was completely necessary. I've gotten to a place when I don't want to do a show that's a finished statement, but rather an open question. And this is one when I continue to wade and weave my way through this terrain and this discourse, that it made me uncomfortable, and it made me challenged. It made me sort of inspired, and all of these sort of feelings and thoughts and emotions would swirl. And I felt like this was such an important discourse. As the sensitivity around animal rights has heightened and increased, I feel like the conversation around it needs to follow suit. And so it's been a tremendous honor, and to wade through this terrain. And I've met a lot of great people and found a lot of great art along the way. And so this is the opportunity to share a few of those people with you this evening. But more thanks to the curatorial staff here, Joseph Vitello, Rebecca Roman, David Dillon, Tyler Hamilton, really everyone on our crew. I launched this idea, I introduced this concept and go, yeah, by the way, I'm not going to be here for 7 weeks. And can you guys just carry the torch and keep this thing going? And it has been a challenge, but they have completely stepped up to the plate and have stewarded the show in a beautiful way, and it's become a much larger collaborative venture. And I couldn't be more proud and pleased. So thank you to everyone at the CAC, to Jamie, to Josh, to everyone that really took ownership and invested in this project. It's been tremendously humbling and inspiring to see that happen. And to thank you to our board, and to Gail and Dave Beckett, and to everyone that supported this show, because this was not only a staff decision, it was very much a board and a collective effort. And I'm so honored again that they put the support behind us, that they had the courage to keep this thing going, because I know it was never going to be a linear process. The concept really kind of grew out of this idea of, when you're looking at the history of animals within art, it's oftentimes not a very pleasant one. I think that animals for a long time were used as content. They were used as metaphors. They were used as avatars. They were instruments for anthropomorphism. But rarely did we allow their intelligence and emotion and energy to be at the forefront. And then even more sadly, a lot of the work that grabbed the headlines were oftentimes cases of exploitation and abuse, really difficult work where an artist is making a point with an inhumane treatment of an animal or an insect. And I felt like this was sort of pushing this very fertile topic into a place that became very polarizing and controversial and unseemly. And so this exhibition in so many ways was a corrective or a recalibration or an opportunity to say, there are other works being made, and that we can debate what kind of agency is involved in these kind of collaborations. Because as I like to say, the animal never initiates the process, but to what degree are they allowed to complicate and contribute and participate within it? And so this has been, again, a tremendously fruitful and fertile area to explore, and I'm really so proud of the way that this exhibition has come together. I also need to thank the advisory council that we assembled. We reached out to the SPCA, to the League for Animal Welfare, to Llewelynn Fletcher, who you're going to hear in a few moments, and really assembled a group, and the staff and the board were also involved. I was showing everybody all of the work that I wanted to include because I needed more research, I needed more feedback. Sometimes you get into your own little echo chamber, and I needed sort of that feedback. And they were so intelligent and patient and thoughtful in the considerations they brought to the project. And SPCA is working with us for the installation with the live cats, and we couldn't be more pleased, and they've been wonderful partners. We're working with aquatics and exotics on the other installation with live fish. And so it's become a platform for very rich and fruitful collaborations and partnerships. But this was also the opportunity to expand the thinking around this. And Jamie and I went to Welly's studio, and I was just so impressed. I had started to delve into the theory around this discourse, and it is wide, and it is very complex and circuitous at times. And Welly is so thoughtful in this place. She has read all of this theory. She's thought about it. She's practiced it. She's wrestled with it in her work. And I was just so struck. I'm like, I want to learn from you. I feel like you have so thought about this so deeply, and I feel like I'm just sort of venturing into this place. And so I commissioned her to write the essay for the brochure. She's done a wonderful job. Please pick one up and read this essay multiple times. But we also have the opportunity tonight for her to present it and to speak in a little bit more of a broader context. So I'm going to read just the brief kind of accolades that she's collected, and then we can welcome her to the stage. So Llewelynn Fletcher is an artist and educator currently based in Cincinnati. She's presented recent projects at Northern Arizona University Art Museum, Esquilito Gallery, the Rochester Art Center, C3 Initiative, Riff Gallery, and recent accolades include a 2018 artist residency at Headland Center for the Arts and an Individual Excellence Award by the Ohio Arts Council in 2017. She received a BA from Dartmouth College and an MFA from the California College of the Arts. Please welcome Llewelynn Fletcher.
I was so distracted by Stephen's suit. So I would like to thank Formica Corporation for their support, David and Gail Beckett, Sandra and Stephen Chaffee, the Ohio Arts Council, and ArtsWave. So thank you.
So thank you, Stephen, for inviting me to be a part of this exhibition in such a unique way for me. I'm really happy to be a part of the conversation. So I wrote an essay for Creatures When Species Meet. It's called Unraveling the Rational. And I'm going to read a good portion of it to you tonight. Could I have a little more light just on me? All right, I'm going to start with I don't get more light. I'm going to start with this quote from Donna Haraway. I'm advocating the understanding that earthly, heterogeneous beings are in this web together for all time, and no one gets to be man. I wrote this essay to get pushy about more deeply considering the complicit and multivalent human relationship with co-creatures in this world. I'm tugging here at the loose threads composing the fabric of human exceptionalism in an attempt to weaken human-centric constructs of personhood, which always and only limit personhood for another. Donna Haraway describes kin-making as a way of making persons, not as humans or individuals, but through an expanded ethics and significant reassessment of our relations to the earth and our co-inhabitants. By unraveling these ties of kin and species, Haraway suggests we might find paths toward the embracing of diverse human people and ultimately a multi-species eco-justice. Historically, differentiation of humans from other species has revolved around the ability to think and reason. The human as rational animal has long claimed a moral and ethical superiority, or power, over our co-creatures. This claim of exceptionalism has led to a culture with severe consequences for non-human people and is tied to fabricated hierarchical divides within our human kinships as well. The world of art here provides space to figure these intimacies in form and image, prodding our ethical, metaphoric, and actual relationships with species kin. Currently, we humans are stuck in a deep and harmful rut of who counts as a person and what bodies deserve protections. Artworks can provide alternate paths and possibilities. If artists are culture producers, what does it mean then to deploy animals in the operation of illustrating existing dynamics, at least, or educating, informing, even transforming through poetics, in my opinion, at best, with an artwork? This exhibition, Creatures When Species Meet, provides rich and lucid provocations to consider current problems and potential in interspecies kinship. Carrie Wheel is an animal studies author and academic. And animal studies is this emergent field within the last 10 years that is really a combination of queer, feminist, ability, and critical race theory expanded into this, taking down this human exceptionalist idea. Carrie Wheel writes, "Our engagement with animals may reveal to us our particular human stupidity, and it is only by deeply attending to animals, or more precisely by becoming attuned to them, I want to suggest, that we may be able to think otherwise and overcome some of the limitations of our so-called rational condition. As Wheel suggests, perhaps this distinctly Homo sapien rational condition comes with a cost of abstraction and distance, even numbness, to the experience of other types of lives. In this exhibition, Yukinori Yanagi's artwork, Wandering Position, offers a poignant and troubling set of questions to consider. Here, a single ant's life and movement is used to present a metaphor of loneliness and isolation. The directed action for the ant in this artwork was to seek a way out of a floor maze of sorts, a bounded rectangular form, hours of wandering in solitude, the artist tracing its progression with crayon, creating a visible trail of its lost meanderings. This is a tiny being so socially wired that its neurological bond to community makes the magnitude of its solitude difficult to even imagine. Many entomologists would argue that an ant colony is far more a single living entity than its members. This artwork illuminates for me my allegiance to my species, how efficiently I can devalue one life in favor of another. The life of this small insect might be worth the exchange for the impactful metaphor created, right? I don't feel enraged by the manipulation of the ant's life experience, but I do feel the power of its solitude. This artwork is effective in its intentions. I am stuck with the truth of that dilemma, and I'm left with the trouble. Artworks also generate occurrences of radical interspecies approaches to kin-making. Within Sophie Cowell's artwork, Suri Cow, the cat is no prop, but a life collaborator being honored and grieved by way of portraiture, song, and remembrance. The most common ways that we humans grieve our people. In this album and related photographs, Suri's personhood is made beyond question. The artist honors the depth of her loss and the meaning of that chosen kinship with sincerity and humor. While researching, reaching beyond this exhibition, I found Hélène Cixoux's essay, A Refugee, and it was such an intimate and linguistic and tactical sister to Cowell's work. In manipulating the texture of language itself in this essay, Cixous grapples with her questioning of instinctual human bias. The author is able to alchemically bend language in ways that make permeable the cat and human identities. She makes tangible the fact of their attunement. Here's an excerpt I'm going to read. I've put it here on the screen as well because the language plays so visually. I wanted you to be able to see it at the same time. She guides me on the battlefield. Here the bird was knocked over by a giant stroke of the paw. Slumped face down against the ground, the animal looked like a huge rat split open twice bigger than itself. With a sharp stroke of my right paw, I brought it back to life. The bird took shape again and dashed sideways over here in the corner behind the sofa. Here the bird lay on its back, one wing folded, the other twisted. A cushion, fallen, upright, pretended to shelter it. I pushed the cushion several times with my tail. Here I called to you, come, come, I called out. I wanted to share my great moment of life. A bird, I called out. I have it. Oh, come, come, I have a bird for you. I committed a crime. What is it you did? You let her do it? Well, precisely, I didn't. I committed a crime of species. I made a human law for my cat, as if I had applied the right for me against her, as if my right were mightier than hers. I wronged my cat. I bombarded her right and denied her cat culture. I accuse myself. And in the name of which right? Between cat and bird, I took a place. I judged, settled, deprived, decided, granted. I sided with the bird without name and without face against my cat, my friend, my hairy daughter, my sister, and my consolation. I forbade death and the life that passes through death. I behaved in everything like a human being with power. In Sixu's prose, pronoun switching evolves between individuals of different species. The language act itself is conferring the same personhood on the cat, on the bird, and on the human. Her language itself contorts to embody their interspecies kin-making. So Judith Butler's essay, Violence, Mourning, Politics, has long haunted my heart and conscience, and it will always come to mind when I'm considering kinship. Judith Butler writes, certain lives will be highly protected, and the abrogation of their claims to sanctity will be sufficient to mobilize the forces of war. Other lives will not find such fast and furious support and will not even qualify as grievable. When I encountered Jonathan de Andrade's video O Pesce at the New Museum in New York a couple of years ago, it had this similar enduring impact on my body, heart, and psyche. When I walked into the screening room, before reading the description on the wall, I saw and felt this. A wall-width video projection of a colorful waterscape with a single human fishing in a small boat. After a time, napping, paddling, waiting, he would catch a fish and hold it while it struggled and slowly died. This was the recurring sequence, a single man and a single fish. And then a new sequence would begin with a different fisherman, a slightly different boat, a slightly different waterway, the same progression. After each man pulled the fish aboard, he would pick it up and hold the large fish firmly against his chest. As the fish struggled to breathe, the camera zoomed in to witness its vibrant, wet, colorful skin, its increasingly bulging eyes as it gasped for breath. Each man had to hold the fish tightly, muscles visibly tensed with the struggle required to keep the fish held to their chest. Then they would stroke the fish, sometimes even putting a cheek down against the fish's body. The video would switch to the next sequence, anticipating the final breath. But after the fish's gasp had slowed, its color faded, and its fight became less fierce. Each man held and stroked the fish with distinctive body gestures. Some were tender, others more mechanical. It became clear to me after several sequences that either this was a local ritual or the artist must have scripted these actions, but when I recognized this, I really didn't care about authorship or script. I cared about the parallel worldly images that were arising in my mind and brought tears to my eyes and a sob in my throat, and still do. This was early 2017, and I was holding the recent murders and images of Eric Garner and Sam DuBose, of Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin, of Sandra Bland and Philando Castile. The video had me imagining these murders happening differently. Each officer holds the body they've pulled from life close to their heart, stays with the trouble, the violence, the death they've enacted. There are times when the impact of an artwork, an essay, a poem can create change, can open minds, can impel empathy, and even stir up transformation. Difficult artworks challenge us to stick with the trouble and let the trouble mix with our vulnerable selves and shift things around. This exhibition and the space of art offer opportunities for attunement, increasing our awareness of the myriad implicit biases underlying daily decisions. These decisions make our world. Who are your kin? Whose lost lives cause your grieving? Why these and not others? With awareness comes the opportunity either to perpetuate or to shift these kinships. Let's recognize together the world building these choices knit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Welly. Okay. Okay, Jeff, I don't know where your presentation is. Well, hopefully we can find it, but I'm gonna introduce our next speaker, Jeff Whetstone. Oh, good. Okay, great.
And you closed it. It was behind hers.
Okay. There it is. Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I first met Jeff Whetstone when I was working in North Carolina. I was at the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art in Winston-Salem, and Jeff was in Durham, North Carolina at that time at Duke University. And I was so struck not only by his work, which is this brilliant blend of anthropology and exploration and art making, where he wades into the landscape and finds these fascinating subcultures, and more often the interaction between wilderness and civilization, mankind and nature, and the way that human beings interact and absorb animal species, and that synergy and the reciprocity that moves between the two. He's one of the most down-to-earth, friendly people you're going to meet, and this casual brilliance that just sort of continues to shine and emanate through his work. And so I knew when I started to put this exhibition together that I wanted to feature him, not fully realizing that he had studied zoology in school before going into the visual arts. And so it's such a profound honor to have him here tonight, and he's going to give you just a little bit of an overview of the works that are in the exhibition that you'll see upstairs, as well as a few other pieces that sort of add or bring added context. So I'm just going to read a brief bio for Jeff and then welcome him up to the stage. Jeff Whetstone was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and has been photographing and writing about the relationship between humans and their environment since he received a zoology degree from Duke University in 1990. Jeff received his MFA in photography from Yale in 2001, and since then his work has been exhibited internationally. In 2007, he was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for a body of photographs entitled New Wilderness. The following year, he received the first Factor Prize for Southern Art. Jeff first exhibited his video work in 2011, where his experimental narrative short on the use of a syrinx premiered at the Moving Image Festival in New York. He is a 2012 recipient of a North Carolina Arts Fellowship in Film and is a professor and head of photography at Princeton University. His work is in many public collections, including the Whitney, the New York Public Library Collection, the North Carolina Museum, the Nasher Museum, and the Yale University Art Gallery. Please welcome Jeff Whetstone.
Thanks, Stephen. It's great to be here. I think I can drive this thing.
Yeah, if we click it, I'm not sure if the video is going to start up.
Let's see. Oh yeah, let's go back. Can I go back? Because I got to get the video up. Well, thanks. Thanks, Stephen and Raphael. And that was such a beautiful reading. It was really, really beautiful. It made me think of a couple of things that I wanted to say before I get into this slideshow, but that. You know, we're in a different time now, and things have changed since Thoreau wrote on Walden Pond. You know, we have an idea of nature that was I think, a private experience in an untouched place, and that's a kind of a colonial idea if you think about it. That you can be a private and untouched. And I think the term nature and the term wilderness are always going to survive, but I think we have to renegotiate what those terms mean because they're really important for humans. And that's kind of what your work, your writing, I thought about when you're writing. Is it on there? How do we find it? Well, like Stephen said, I studied zoology, and it was really not about a professional endeavor, but a really love for animals. I grew up in Tennessee, and I grew up in a really rural place where I did have a private experience with sort of untouched nature, but I really got to know the animals around me. And if we can't play it, we can just move on. This is part of the work. This is a work called Zoolatry, and zoolatry means the worship of animals. And as a zoologist, it always kind of was confounding that you would take an animal out of its. The way you studied animals often was you take an animal out of its habitat and isolated it, and then you studied it. It was kind of this way. It was a controlled study, like a lot of scientific studies are. So when I became an artist, I've done a lot of different projects, but an early project kind of reflecting upon the study of animals was that I would go. I'm very interested in suburban wilderness, and so I went in a 10-mile radius of my house and caught every animal that I could and isolated it in a container and photographed it. And I thought this was kind of a more honest portrayal of wildlife photography as from a scientific point of view than possibly like, sneaking up and hunting an animal. Now, the animals were released, but they also, I'm sure, went through a significant amount of trauma to be like caught by this dude out there and then put in a bucket and then like have a camera like hovered over it and photograph it. But I also kind of wanted to imply that there was a certain amount of cruelty to the study, to this kind of typographical study, that this typographical study and this representation of animal always has some kind of cruelty in it. Now, studying zoology and also anthropology, I'm always in this mindset. Even though I'm an artist now, I'm always thinking of a landscape as a territory that is constantly being contested and marked, and a human as an animal whose instincts are at the surface as much as their modernity. And so part of my work with the New Wilderness was trying to find these instincts seeping out and making themselves apparent. One of the instincts, of course, is camouflage, which can be very militaristic and also very, bucolic in a way. Like early camouflage, this is called a ghillie suit. And a ghillie suit is only used by special forces people, people who do paintball enthusiasts, and turkey hunters. So those are the three people who do ghillie suits. And a ghillie suit traditionally is woven from the plant that you want to be camouflaged in. So this ghillie suit was woven from a weed in North Carolina, but I left the hunter attached to the weed. So I'm going to talk about that. I want to talk about this. So hopefully this one will play. This is a video. It's called On the Use of a Syrinx. A syrinx is mythological nymph, but it's also the name of the anatomical name of a voice box of a bird. So we have a larynx, they have a syrinx. And so something from my own kind of culture, turkey hunters, something really strange about turkey hunters is that turkeys, you don't go stalking a turkey, you have to call you can only kill the male turkey. It's illegal to kill the females. So you can't stalk them. You have to call them, right? You have to call them to come to you, and you can only call them during mating season. They won't answer any other calls, and you can only call them by imitating a female turkey who wants to mate. So I asked some turkey hunters over a course of a number of seasons I put little microphones on them, and I asked them to say what they were saying to the male bird and translate it into English. So let's see if that plays.
Where are you, boy? Where are you? Being about as sweet as I can be. Tell him I love him. I got food over here. I got some pussy. But I'm kind of getting anxious.
That's a short clip of a 15-minute long movie, but it in this really interesting, I guess what Stephen called a subculture, but these hunters transpose their masculinity and kind of project some kind of a male fantasy while imitating a female, but also imitating a bird. So I think it's really kind of beautiful that these really masculine hunter Southern guys kind of, through this ritual, can transform themselves into the desire for the bird, to the desire for the male, the desire for another being. And so part of my project in New Wilderness was looking at masculinity in a way, Southern masculinity, and trying to twist it into not necessarily like a homoeroticism, but into something that's much more expansive than just something that's brutal. I'm going to skip along because I want to play the first video a little bit. I just finished a body of work that was in Prospect, New Orleans. That was Au Péché. I saw that at the New Museum, and it really was amazing, beautiful film. And I actually did a film that was very much inspired by that. But it was about the people who fish on the Mississippi River, and the fish that they caught, and this is a very industrial, and much like the Ohio River, a very industrial highway. So the Mississippi River is both a natural place, a place of wilderness, a place to gather food, but it's also a super highway for capitalism, or for global capitalism. So these are some of the pictures that I took of the catfishers on the Mississippi River. And as a zoologist, I don't really think this is gross at all. I think it's actually incredibly beautiful. I mean, the most beautiful animal in the world is arguably is the bottlefly. It's actually more iridescent than any insect in the world, but they're a symbol of death and rot. So this picture, I kind of try to compare to a Dutch landscape, and I tried to make it as extremely beautiful as possible to get the people and it's actually, I thought, well, if you're not going to sell this picture to any museum in the world because no one wants it, let's just go all out and make it super beautiful. But it's also from a very honest place that animals have certain charismas, right? And we want to protect tigers. We love swordfish, and mahi, whatever really that is. It's a dolphin, not a dolphin, but a dolphin. But catfish are really kind of low on that charisma scale, and bottleflies are the lowest. And I think that suburban wilderness is low on that charisma scale. And so this is a part of the natural wilderness, nature and wilderness that I am kind of trying to kind of exercise that from a charisma deficit, because we can't afford to only protect charismatic places and charismatic animals anymore. Those are some of the images, but if I can I go back to that that video really quickly. Just want to. There's a video that is. Okay, yeah, we'll just play this. Okay, so this is drawing Elafe obsoleta, or drawing E obsoleta, and Elafe obsoleta is the Latin taxonomy for the black rat snake, which is basically the most widespread, kind of bigger snake in the East. And there was a zoologist named Thomas Say from the early 19th century who was very famous for going across the eastern part and even the west and very, very much in the south and renaming all the animals, right? Like the Native Americans didn't have names for the animals they saw every day. But he renamed animals, and he was a great zoologist, very well respected. And he named this animal Elafe obsoleta. Elafe, a genus of snake, and obsoleta in kind of biological terms doesn't mean obsolete. It means kind of means redundant instead of obsolete. And he said this in a journal entry. This animal is widespread and unremarkable. And I don't know why, but it just pissed me off. When I read that, I was like, what do you mean unremarkable? They're the best. So I caught one, and I took it away from its habitat, and I tried to make it remarkable I wanted to draw its habitat, kind of Piedmont area, North Carolina, with the snake itself. So, of course, the snake is not interested at all in my artistic endeavors. It just wants to get out of, this is actually a vessel that I made to look like a plane. So I did some fancy lighting stuff and made it to look like a plane. And I think what me and Billy the snake came out with, I named it after my grandmother, even though I don't know if it was truly a female snake. But and I'm not really sure about my grandmother either. But I named it, I wanted to, what we created together was, I think, a document of uncollaboration, right? I like this strange document where this documentation of uncollaboration, where the snake has its own desires, and I have my own desires, and we don't meet really well. And I think maybe that's kind of a metaphor for humans and nature in a way, but it's also maybe a metaphor for the creative act, that the drawing itself is a wild thing, that the art itself is a wild thing, that the artist doesn't necessarily have control over. I think some of the best art is just kind of birthed into the world and it becomes its own thing. It might be also a metaphor, hopefully not a premonition of what is obsolete. And certainly 16 millimeter film, which is shot on, is obsolete. And maybe drawing is obsolete, and animals might be obsolete in the way we work the world now. But they are not at all what Thomas Say said. They are not at all unremarkable. So, thank you. Please sit down.
Okay, so we're close to 8, so we're not going to have a lot of time for dialogue, but maybe I'll ask one question and then we'll open it up to the audience. So I think I was struck by how both of your presentations touched upon, I think, one of Donna Haraway's core concepts, this idea of becoming with, or a co-evolution,
or this idea that we sort of break down the integrity of ourselves and allow ourselves to be reshaped through this dynamic and relationship with the other and with the animal. But I'm wondering, does the animal get anything out of this? Like, I wonder, what I wrestled with when we think about sort of trying to gain a greater sensitivity or a sympathy to animals, oftentimes we're protecting them against us. You know, do they need our salvation? Do they need our intervention? Do they need to co-evolve with us? And it was something I wrestled with, you know, looking at the exhibition and thinking about the work, but I just wanted to get your feedback, because I think that was part of it's sort of ingrained in both of your presentations.
I liked your comment about questioning whether the animal really is obsolete, and I think that really has to do with us. I like Donna Haraway also sort of getting rid of the term Anthropocene and calling it Capitalocene, which is so true, because, you know, the report that just came out about all the species that are expiring and these crazy disasters and all of this, it's really just about us becoming obsolete. I mean, that's the fear, right? So I don't really think we impact animals greatly, and we will be gone long before, you know, so many others, and others will come after us. So I think it's really tricky. I love that you took on the challenge of this exhibition, because I think every single artwork that collaborates with an animal will have problematics, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't happen or be made or be prodded at. And so I think it's you know, that's what art does, is creates this conversation. I would say the animal sort of has a UFO visitation from the human, you know, like they got captured and had some crazy experience with the camera above them, the light above, you know, and then it goes on. So I wouldn't say, you know, you could call that trauma, but maybe it's also some we don't get to know, you know.
Well, specifically, I guess Billy was stressed out when he was caught in a really precarious place near a highway, and that snake had been through a lot, and he kind of became a part of the family. It was very. I made this with my kids, and we realized that Billy could only do one shoot per week, because it tired him out, or it tired the animal out, and so we were like really protective of like how long we shot. I was like this movie star that we didn't want to like mess with its voice, and so, you know, and then there was a lot of tears when we let Billy go. But the broader question is this: yes, they need our protection, big time. I mean, they needed it 125 years ago, but yeah. And I think that part of this, and you alluded to it in your introductory remarks, for one, we are animals. So like zoologists don't say humans and animals. We're not, you know, there are non-human animals and there are humans. And we are primates, great apes, and it's just that we are animals, so we are them. But also, I think that animals might do this too, but humans make a lot of meaning. We're meaning makers, and I think as artists, that's our role, is to make meaning. That's why it seems so difficult so many times, because it's kind of a proto meaning making. We're in the process of making meaning. A lot of the meaning that we derive of who we are as a culture comes from animals. You know, we constantly compare ourselves to animals. I mean, we're here at Cincinnati, the Bengals, you know, a species that will likely go extinct in 25 years. So, yeah, you know, what does it mean to have metaphors for us that we killed the generative thing of the metaphor. So I think there'll be as we're going now, there'll not only be a crisis of an ecological crisis, but I think there'll be a psychological, cultural crisis when we lose the roots of our meaning. Oh, there's all kinds of easy metaphors that we can make, but you can go back into literature and know that human meaning, if you take it from Western tradition and Greek literature, human meaning kind of came out of like animal comparisons. And I think the cornerstones and building blocks of who we think we are actually being erased. And I think that's really, we have to protect it or gird ourselves for a psychological or a cultural break.
I'm going to add a couple things to that. I also, the human-animal sort of separating from when we kind of maybe wouldn't want to call ourselves animal is really with the advent of art making. And I say those words in my essay of, that putting down a mark outside. And the first things that we drew were animals and this separation of, and I think a lot about that as an artist, that there is meaning made. We're obsessed with meaning, and yet I do think it might have a cost of that separation, and that's something then that we have to go beyond, grapple with, bring back to us, learn from our co-species how they do it, how do they deal with trauma, because we have shared physiology, and there's a lot to learn, but we're not terrific listeners. At this point, we're great lecturers, And the other thing I wanted to say is, Donna Haraway, speaking of your question, is becoming with, and Donna Haraway uses this term, but she's really using it. She uses the image of parasites. We are absolutely, they're thriving. We don't live without the living beings that are a part of our bodies. And so she's really referring to that. And then I think of Michael Pollan's book, The Botany of Desire, where, he sort of shifts perspective of how plants manipulate us for their desires, by basically tapping into our desires for their propagation. And so it's sort of switching the power structure in ways. And I think the more we can do that, the more perspective and hopefully action we'd take quicker.
And I think research is revealing, we have more non-human DNA in our bodies than human DNA.
Right.
It's kind of like this division was, this division of taxonomy might be kind of bunk science. Maybe there's not such a division between you and your dog. You might share the same biome in your gut. That's why you like your dog so much.
Well, I want to open this up to questions. If anyone in the audience would like to join or expand the conversation. No, maybe not. Okay, Shekar.
I just had a different reaction, when I looked at the snake and you kind of making it go around. I felt like the snake was having a lot of fun. It was tango and witty kind of thing. It was the opposite kind of thing, that snakes are usually quite shy and they run away. And here the snake was quite engaged.
Well, you're picking up on something very subtle that's an artistic conceit. The film is run backwards. So the film is run backwards. It's all backwards. So it's the opposite of this. If I put a stick to a snake's head, its head's going to go that way. But if I run the film backwards, I put the stick down, and the snake comes to the stick. So it's actually, you're exactly right. But I flipped it so it looks like we are collaborating, but then I also give you, some clues, like, do snakes actually crawl backwards? And what's backwards to a snake? It's a line. And so that black and white linear thing is easy to flip backwards. So you can be kind of seduced into thinking it's a collaboration when it's actually the snake just is trying to get out, but it's actually going in, right?
So I had visited Thomas Saraceno's studio in Berlin a couple of years ago, and 2 floors of his studio are devoted to very, very different types of spiders, arachnoids, right? Some of them very exotic and remote. And he has a whole slew of nurses and people who look like doctors with their white lab coats monitoring these spiders. And once a month, he has an interspecies concert just for the spiders, where a musician will not play for a human audience, but just for the spiders. And it has been shown that after those concerts, the spider's webbing becomes much more intricate and nuanced. And I was wondering if in any of your studies, your controlled experiments or whatever, you've come across any such interesting interspecies collaborations that are kind of interesting, that take something forward. It was as if the spiders were listening, and they really were at some point.
Well, it's funny because there's a multiple works in the exhibition that feature spiders, and I think the one that was most striking to me was the Nina Cacciadorian, The Mended Spider Webs, when again it's sort of in some ways a commentary on this idea of the savior complex. And she goes out and she finds these broken spider webs, and she goes with red thread and she goes to repair the spider webs in a very careful way to restore their integrity. And she comes back the next day and all the red thread is tossed into the ground. And she thinks, oh, I guess the wind blew it down. And then she sees that the spiders in spider webs that she thought were abandoned came back and expunged all of that help and all of that intervention. And they're like, we know what we're doing. And it's amazing to me to just sort of think, and I saw this other artwork, because there's such consistency in the way that they spin webs and create these architectures. And there's sort of this, Thomas Saraceno does this amazing research in the idea that sort of their energy is manifest through these webs. But I saw one work when they would sort of expose spiders to LSD and smoke and drugs, and you get all of these like weirdo spider webs. And again, I'm not advocating that kind of work, but it's but we're kind of thinking about how do we intervene, how do we save, how do we change, and the animal's just like, listen, I got this, And so it's funny to say, I didn't know that, playing music, I guess it's the same debate of whether you sing to your plants if they grow better. I don't know if those are all human projections or if they're actually there's research behind whether this improves livelihood of the other that we want it to do. So I don't know, but it's a great debate that we'll probably never know the answer to.
There's an interesting study that was done by a Dutch scientist in the tropics somewhere, I'm not sure where, and it was about interspecies communication. And it was about, the story is that he was kind of, do birds talk to monkeys? And the answer is yes. And the answer is, when a jaguar is in the vicinity, the birds see it first, and they have a certain call. And then the monkeys, who can't see, that are further away, they'll do a certain call. And there's other animals who will do a certain call. So do the birds talk to monkeys, or do the monkeys listen to the birds? We don't know what is really happening, but we know that the monkeys listen to the birds, and they'll start a call. And he was out in the forest, and he heard this bird call, and he heard the monkey call. He goes, oh, wow, this is it. And as he walked around, he heard the more bird calls and closer monkey calls. He realized that they were trying to communicate to him that there was a jaguar stalking him. And the monkeys got closer and closer and were calling to him, like, get out of the way, you idiot! Do something! Climb! and the guy was like, wow, I'm being protected by this danger through an interspecies communication. I would say that happens a lot more than we give credit. I think the human I don't want to say ego, but whatever it is, that we are kind of walled off from everything except our pets. It's, you know, these turkey hunters who end up killing the turkey, you know, so it's very complicated, but they're so attuned to every breath that a bird, you know, they get there before the birds wake up, so they know what birds wake up first means what. It means something. Like if the crows wake up first, that's good for them. But if the blackbirds wake up first, that's bad for them. You know, they're very attuned to the whole conversation that happens in the wild. And that's why I kind of like, I'm a little bit, you know, saddened, you know, horrified when they kill the bird because it's so brutal. But I'm also kind of admire these hunters because they're in it. They formed a practice to where they can have interspecies communication.
So the hunters are, I mean, we as humans are top, unfortunately, of the food chain.
Yeah, apex predator, yeah.
So when it comes to the hunters fooling the birds or having a bigger brain than the turkeys, I have a hard time admiring the hunters for figuring that out because they're fooling. So when it comes to the humans, being able to eat the meat of the animals that we fool,
No,
it's a hard time admiring them because we have a bigger brain. So when it comes to the art of the videos, I just have a hard time with it. And I would like your opinion on that.
You're totally right. I have a hard time with it too. It's a problem. And but I can't help but, as someone who's studied zoologist and been with an ornithologist, and I think these these men that I worked in South Carolina with, I mean, they know they know something else about the bird, and it is a problem. I mean, biologists probably kill as many animals as hunters do. And so but these hunters don't hate turkeys. They love turkeys. They have turkey stickers on the backs of their trucks. Well, they love the bird. You know, they like turkey stickers. They worship this bird, but the only way they can get to it, it's kind of like a terrible, horrific, violent, abusive romance. They love it so much they have to kill it. You know, and it's problematic. And if you saw the video, which Stephen has seen, the problems get all the way heightened off the chart. And but yeah, I don't know what to say, but I don't think it's clear cut. I don't think it's quite as ethically clear. There's something to learn. Although and there's a lot of different ethical problems. You know, I'm not a hunter myself, but like Ducks Unlimited people, right, who hunt ducks. They kill ducks, you know. They actually protect more land than the Nature Conservancy. It's because they want the ducks to come back and so they can kill them, right? So, but I think it's a time for like whatever works.
Mike is doing crazy things. Okay. It's a lot like the zoo. I lived here for 2 years and read all about, I just was doing all of this reading and research and could not decide to go to the zoo, one of the preeminent zoos, you know, in the world here in Cincinnati. And I finally went, and it was incredible. I don't get to experience up close these incredible beings, you know, and witness them. And at the same time, it's terribly problematic, you know. There is at once both the conservancy that the zoo is doing that we need, and at the same time, it is a spectacle, and you can't deny it. So it's both at the same time. And I think that by talking about it and really questioning it and keeping on these conversations, we go to the zoo with a broad mind, and the zoo does their work to, expand the conversation about the efforts and how quickly these species are disappearing. And then you feel it in your body because you're with this being that won't be here in 25 years. So do we have one other moment? I wanted to just add one thing about, a couple questions came up about, listening to other species. So there's a book by Peter Levine called Waking the Tiger, and he's a physiologist, and he studies tiger and deer in particular for their we share a physiological fight or flight syndrome with, our fight or flight instinct. And we are the only animal that experiences PTSD besides animals that have been basically incarcerated by humans in some way or traumatized in that way. And so he is studying these tigers and what they do with that huge surge of life-saving energy that helps you lift the car or sprint away from, whatever is the fast animal chasing you. And basically, the particular response that this animal has is to rub on the tree. A deer trembles and shakes. So the kind of listening I'm talking about that humans can do and that this physiologist is doing, and things like TRE, trauma release therapy, and are, doing those processes that we learn by looking at animals closely and what they're doing with that same fight or flight symptom that we share, then to release that energy, and shake and get that energy out that's stashed and stored in the body. I wanted to give an example of some research that, cross-pollinates in all these fields, but that we can listen and watch carefully, and I think that's what artists also do historically, and learn from and then try things out, because we've got some really intelligent co-species around us.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end this. I wish we had an hour more to discuss, but for now, let's please thank our speakers here.
Ha